Hola a todos, gracias por estar aquí con nosotros y vamos a empezar en algunos minutos.
All right. Welcome everyone. My name is Clint McManus and this is the East End Bike Plan Community Meeting. It's our second meeting.
Hola a todos, yo me llamo Clint McManus. Eso es nuestra segunda reunión de este plan de East End Bike, las bicicletas de East End.
For those who need interpretation, I'm going to turn on interpretation. We've got a couple of interpreters here. Yeah, go ahead.
Para los que necesitan interpretación, tenemos dos intérpretes aquí y vamos a encender la función de interpretación.
So to turn interpretation on, after I do it, locate this interpretation button that looks like a globe, and then you will select your language preference, English or Spanish. And once you do that, make sure that you click mute original audio so that you don't hear both English and Spanish at the same time.
Para encender la interpretación, lo que hay que hacer es localice el icono de Interpretation en la parte inferior derecha de la pantalla. Luego seleccionen la preferencia de idioma, lo que es inglés o español, y finalmente seleccionen el modo silencio audio original para evitar escuchar la presentación en ambos idiomas.
So I'm going to start interpretation now.
Entonces vamos a encender ahorita ya la interpretación.
Great, thank you so much, Constance. I'm gonna share my screen again. And let's get started. I'll leave these up here for just a second in case anybody needs that. Don't forget to click the globe, select your language, and then click mute original audio. If you have any problems, feel free to send a message in the chat and we can help you work through that. All right. And welcome everybody. We are also recording this meeting just as a heads up. So we want to share this with folks who may not have been able to make it today. So the meeting recording will be available on the project website at eastendbikeplan.com/events. So you can check that out. And if you want to spend more time with the slides, they will be there as well. So before we get to introductions, I wanted to just share what we're planning to do today. So I'll give you a brief rundown of the agenda. We're going to have a welcome from our members of the project team and Commissioner Adrian Garcia. Then we wanted to cover what we've accomplished to date. We've been working on this plan for a few months, and we want to show you what we've been able to achieve in that time. My colleague Jessica Wiggins is going to lead us through community feedback and what we've heard from community members, including a lot of you here. And then my colleague Jeff Carlton and I, we're going to talk about the actual bike network recommendations. So we've drawn some lines on the map where we think we can put some great high comfort bikeways in the East End. And so we're going to show y'all what those look like. And then Jessica's going to take over and lead us through some recommendations and ideas about things that are outside of building bike lanes. So what are program and policy recommendations? Then once we do all that, we're gonna work our way through that pretty quickly, and we're gonna turn it over to a panel. We've got 4 panelists and Veronica, our moderator, and they're gonna discuss what this plan means to them as folks who live and work in the East End. And then we'll talk about where we go from here for next steps. So, a quick round of introductions. We've got a few folks who are kind of the project managers behind this plan, and I first want to introduce Brian Brown from the Harris County Engineering Department. Brian, if you want to say a few words.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining. Thank you, Clint.
You bet. Jorge Bustamante from Harris County Precinct 2.
Hi, everyone. Jorge Bustamante. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I see we have quite a good number of attendees, and it's still climbing. So I'm really excited that everyone in the East End is engaged on this plan, and welcome to this meeting.
And Brian, did I cut you off? I wasn't sure.
No, you didn't. I just want to make sure that you recognize Dr. Webb and the folks from Rice that are here.
Yes, no, thank you for that. Actually, that's a great point. We've got a Rice class, engineering class that's joined us today to observe. So thank you, Dr. Webb, and also thank you, Elisa Max, for inviting them. We really appreciate that. So our last plan sponsor, Veronica Chapa-Korchinski from the East End District.
Hey, Clint, and hello, everybody. My name is Veronica Chapa-Korchinski. I'm the president of the East End District, and we're grateful for your time. Quiero dar bienvenidos a todos y gracias por estar aquí con nosotros esta noche.
Thank you. And you'll hear more from Veronica later. She's our panel moderator. So, and then just wanted to mention too, throughout this plan, we've had a group of community leaders and experts that have shared their knowledge and expertise they're part of this community advisory group that has helped guide the plan and make sure that we stay on track and that we're meeting the needs of the community. And then I wanted to briefly mention, I work for Traffic Engineers, Inc. and Jessica and Jeff, they'll introduce themselves later when they present, are my colleagues there. We've got folks from Tool Design Group who have been helping us on the design side, and then Tech-A-Lot who have been helping us a lot with translation, interpretation, and community outreach. And then I would also like to invite Commissioner Adrian Garcia to kick us off with a few words.
Thank you, Clint. Buenas noches a todos. Gracias por tenerme. Thank you for having me this evening. And it is an honor and a pleasure. I want to thank all the sponsors for tonight's event. And I particularly want to say thank you to the East End District for their partnership in this effort to make our roadways safer and healthier for everyone in the community. This has been a very, very exciting project. And as you can tell, I'm wearing my cap that I picked up at one of the recent pop-ups that Jorge and I attended. And why am I wearing this? Because I rode my bike home just a little while ago and then got back to the office in time to be on this call. I try to get off the road before it gets dark. It's got to be safe. Even though I got my lights and I wear my reflective gear, I try to be as safe as possible and get off the roads at night. So I made my way home. And that's why this particular project is important and exciting for me, because I want to make sure that our roadways are safe and healthy for everyone involved. And I want to thank the consultants, my team, for all their respective work. But before I get into the deeper into the discussion about this particular plan, I do want to take a step back and talk about the pandemic just a second. We have been through a great deal, you and I, your families, and I hope that no one has been severely affected by the pandemic. I hope none of you have lost a loved one in your home, in your family, to the pandemic. And that's why we have to continue wearing our face mask, continue to wash our hands and practice social distancing to the extent that we can. But also, I want to make sure that you are aware that my office is working aggressively to get as many vaccines out to the community as quickly as possible. So please follow us on all of our social media pages for Precinct 2, because that's where we will post when we will be doing the next vaccine site. And if there is a senior home that hasn't gotten them, if there's some place, a group, an organization, a club that needs their vaccines, please let me know so that we can do everything to make sure that we're reaching out to every aspect of Precinct 2, every community. I don't want to leave anyone behind. Last year has been too tragic for us all, and I don't want to repeat that in this year. So please follow us on our social media pages so that we can make sure to inform you when the next vaccine rollout is there. And in case you haven't been made aware, look, I'm double vaccinated. This shoulder has gotten both of the vaccines. I just got it this weekend. Got my last one this weekend. Next weekend, I will have now had the 2 weeks that it takes for the vaccine to have its maximum protection. I'm not taking this lightly. I'm not in that high risk category, but I don't want to find out whether this virus can adversely affect me. And that's why I want to make sure that if you've had your vaccine, then join me in being an ambassador to the community and actively talk to people and let them know that you got your vaccine and that you're well, you haven't turned colors, you're not growing another arm or foot or anything like that, and encourage others to step forward to get their vaccines. This is how we're going to get back to our normal. This is how we're going to save lives. And in the East End in particular, and in Precinct 2 in general, we have lost too many lives. People of color, Latinos, were at the highest rate of the mortality rate of this pandemic. I don't want to repeat that again, but I need your help. So please help me in carrying out the message that this vaccine is good for everyone and that we need to encourage others to step forward to get it. And also, I want to make sure not to forget to give thanks and appreciation to Dr. Webb for having his students on this call. I have several engineers in my office, and we know well the challenge that we have here in government with civil engineering. This bike plan will ultimately be put into effect by civil engineers. We need bright people. We need the next generation of innovation. And I know that that will come from many of the young people that are on this call today. And I have a special connection with Rice University. Dr. Enrique Barrera is a professor of material science over at Jones College. So on his behalf, let me just say, Jiba. And for those students at Rice, you know what that means. But we welcome you. We need you to get a firsthand view of how government works, community engagement. I really believe in making sure that these plans come from the ground up. So because no disrespect to our engineers or to our future engineers, but I have seen firsthand when we think a plan has been well put together in a room, but hasn't seen how it touches the ground, and realize that when you listen to the people, those plans, although well-designed and well thought through, become even better when the community has had an opportunity to weigh in. So with that, let me just now say to the bike plan, as I talked about, I bike, I average, when the weather permits, about 60 miles a week on my bike, going to and from work. I bike actively on the weekends. I try to get around to many parts of the precinct to inspect it, if you will, from the seat of a bicycle. And the reality of it is, look, this isn't my first rodeo. I haven't been talking about biking as a true option to our transportation options. I want to make sure that if people want to bike, that they can do it, but they need to be able to do it safely. Nothing breaks my heart more than to see ghost bikes out on the roads and in the neighborhoods. We can do better than that. That's why I've been a proponent for Vision Zero, making sure that we make a commitment to recognize that we won't be able to build enough freeways to accommodate every single car. So we have to be thoughtful to make sure that we're thinking about all modes of transportation, including walking and including cycling. And so this is why this particular project is important to me. And so what you're going to hear tonight is perspective. And I want to thank Veronica for her leadership in moderating those panels, because you're going to be able to hear how this plan that is going to be proposed to you tonight has come together, not just from the engineers, but they did reach out to the community. There was thoughtful engagement. I was a part of those discussions early on, and seeing how all of that perspective was brought together, and making sure that a place like the East End is well respected, because the East End is on the move. People want good, safe, and complete bike lanes. People want good and safe sidewalks. That is why my office in this particular project created one of the first partnership projects in making sure that this plan gets off and running to a good start. Then we'll come back and put more resources to it to bring it to life. And so I'm excited about this, but again, it needs your input so we can fine tune it. And then ultimately we'll be able to see ourselves and run into each other on those bike lanes on any given day, in the morning, in the evening, on the weekend, to and from work. This is how we're going to get to see our neighbors. And look, while you're biking, do what I do. I actively say hello to people, because we can become really impersonal on a bike just as much as we can in our cars. So let's break those barriers down. Let's say hello to everybody. Let's engage our neighbors. Let's respect our fellow pedestrians and bicyclists out there. Let's really stay the community that we are, a community that comes together during tough times, and a community that comes together to make good projects like this come to life and benefit so many in our community. So Clint, thank you for this opportunity. Veronica, good to see you. Thank you for leadership. I'm excited about the partnership that we have here. And I'm excited, more importantly, to be able to have a complete bike plan that I can put my bike on and get around the East End. So I look forward to visiting y'all, and give Renee a shout out. Wellness on Wheels is an incredible organization. So if you're looking for a good organization to contribute to, think about Wellness on Wheels. He's doing some phenomenal work out there in the East End. Thank y'all very much. Y'all have a good discussion.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Garcia. 60 miles a week is a lot more than I'm able to do. So I respect that.
It's why I'm losing weight.
That's great. Well, thank you again. So with that, let's dig into it. We just wanted to start by reiterating the purpose of this plan, and the commissioner spoke to it very well. Really, the goal is to create a full high comfort network of bikeways across the East End. And when we say the East End, you can see there on the screen, they're in beige, that's what we mean. So the East End includes several neighborhoods, Pecan Park, Second Ward, Eastwood, Magnolia Park. So we want to connect all of these neighborhoods and all of the destinations within the East End, and also the destinations around the East End, with bikeways that are comfortable to use, comfortable and safe to use. And we also want to recommend, the goal of the plan is to recommend not just bikeways in the ground, but also initiatives like programs and policies that support a bike-friendly East End as well. So as I mentioned earlier, we've been at this for several months now. So you can see the "We Are Here" sign. We're now in late March at that second community event, but we've met before this with the community in early December at our first community event, and the community advisory group there you can see on the green dots. They've been meeting regularly to advise us on the plan and make sure that we're headed in the right direction. We also, after the first community event, we released a survey. It was open for most of December and January, and a mapping tool that went along with that. And both of those tools gave us a lot of insight into the community needs, and Jessica will speak to that later. And then you can see in April and May, we're going to take what we hear today and wrap up the implementation plan and pull the final plan together. So we'll have a third community event close to the end of May where we can share our final recommendations, and we hope that y'all are able to make it to that too. So if you would use the chat to finish this sentence for us. So we'd like to hear from y'all. I'm interested in the East End bike plan because, and you should be able to just use the chat function to answer. Give y'all a few minutes. So we got someone says, I'm interested in the East End bike plan because I live here and bike here. It's a great reason. Jesse's carrying the weight for all the team. Okay, great. We've got other folks that live, work, and play, shop around the area. Sounds like Danielle also uses public transit. So that's great. Biking and public transit go really well together, and this plan hopes to support that. Some folks mentioning that it's currently not safe to bike in the neighborhood. Folks wanting the community to be safer for biking. That's definitely something that we heard in our first community event. Someone wanting to use their bike often and their car less. That's a great goal. And then whoever wrote, I think the East End can be the best biking neighborhood in Houston. I love that. This is our first step to getting there. So thank you for that. Those are all great answers and definitely matches what we heard, like I mentioned, from our first community engagement. So I did want to mention that we're going to share a lot of information today, and you're going to hear great things from our panelists. But I wanted to say, after this meeting, we really want you to spend some time with a survey. So we've got a survey that is already up on our website at eastendbikeplan.com, and Jessica can share the link, or she actually just shared the SurveyMonkey link in the chat, so you can take that after this meeting. That survey is to get your feedback on everything you hear today, and we want to hear what you think about the bike network. We want to hear what you think about the programs and policies. You can take the survey in English and in Spanish, and you can also share the survey with anybody who you think might be interested. They don't have to be here in this meeting. We want to hear from as many people as possible. So we'll definitely remind you at the end of the presentation, but if you come up with ideas and you're not able to share them in the chat today, please spend time with the survey. So I'd like to cover, as I mentioned, our plan accomplishments. I've mentioned before, we had our community event on December 5th, where we had a bike tour. The commissioner joined us for that. And we also had a map where folks could show us where they want to see bike lanes and what concerns them about safety. We had 2 news articles around that time, including the Chronicle, and we also had some interviews from Commissioner Garcia. He conducted 3 radio interviews. He's been a great proponent of this plan throughout. That whole time, we were also conducting some in-person outdoor outreach, some COVID-safe outreach in the community, just letting folks know about the event and about the website and how they could learn more. And we also, during that time, conducted a community fact book. So that was our way of understanding what is going on in the community, what are the demographics, what are the mobility trends. We also, as I mentioned, we had an initial survey where we collected more than 350 responses, and we also had a map tool. You can see a screenshot of that on the right, where we collected 370 pieces of input from that map tool. So that really allowed us to then take that information, analyze it, and then come up with the bikeway recommendations that we're going to show y'all today. We also spent time during that entire time meeting with the community advisory group, talking about these bikeways, talking about programs and policies. So that's what we've been up to. And just to share a little bit, just a one page about kind of what we learned about the East End and the context of this bike plan. So the East End, as many of you know, is predominantly Hispanic. It has historic ties to the Houston Ship Channel. And currently, almost 90% of the residents in the East End identify as Hispanic. And 3/4 of all households in the East End speak Spanish. We also have over 1/4 of households in the East End that are in poverty. That's higher than the county average. And that also means that quite a few of those households don't have internet access. So we've been working to do our best to do some in-person engagement for the plan. And then just in terms of mobility trends on the left, that's a pie chart of East End trip distances. So about 42% of all trips in the East End are called short trips, what we call short trips. So that's anywhere between 0 and 3 miles. And those are trips that are really achievable on a bike. And that percentage is only expected to grow in the next few decades. So we think this plan is coming right at the right time. And then on the right, you can see for those folks who go to work right now, most folks are driving alone to work. There's actually a pretty significant number of folks in the East End that are carpooling, and then 7 to 8% that are taking transit, walking, or biking. And that, given the population of the East End, actually represents hundreds of folks. So we want to make sure that this plan allows folks who want to bike to work but don't feel safe, as some of you mentioned. We want to make sure that this plan allows those folks to do that. And then finally, about 1 in 5 households in the East End have limited access to vehicles. So I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Wiggins to talk to us about what we heard from the community.
Great, and I'll just go ahead and answer a question that we got in the chat as well. The community fact book is not posted on the website currently, but we will be sure to post that this week. Additionally, everything that was included in the fact book will also be included in the final plan. So keep a lookout on the website this week, and we can get. We
actually do have a link to the fact book on the website. It's on the about the plan page, which I will post.
Perfect.
I'll post in the chat. So thank you for that question, Daniel.
Okay, great. So let's talk about community feedback. As the commissioner said, this is an important piece of what we do to make sure that we're creating a plan from the ground up. Can we go to the next slide? So who did we hear from? Of the 350 survey respondents, the vast majority of the people we heard from were East End residents, which is great. Most are adults and most identify as either white or Hispanic. So the first thing we wanted to know was how people were using their bikes currently. And there's a lot of really great information on this slide, but the key point here is people are using their bicycles mostly for exercise and for fun more than ever before. And they want to ride their bikes more. Not only that, but with the safe and connected network that we are looking to develop, people would start to use their bikes for expanded uses and to go to new destinations. So not only places like Buffalo Bayou, our parks, but moving into places like downtown to get to school, University of Houston, Magnolia Park, and Eastwood Transit Centers. So an interest from respondents to kind of expand the way they use their bicycle, which is a great thing. So what does the public think our first step should be? A couple no-brainers here: fill gaps that exist in the current network. And then after that, build connections that then address safety. And in addition to infrastructure, thinking about how we can get more people out to ride, I want to direct your attention to number 4 under the top 5 things to encourage more biking. Seeing more people like me riding bikes. That's a really key thing I don't think we were expecting to see from people. So how can we encourage that through our programs and policies moving forward? And then where would people like to ride their bike? The key takeaway from this map, we asked folks to kind of use a piece of string at our community event and outline where they'd like to ride. And there wasn't a piece in the district that was left out. People want to use their bikes all over the East End and every neighborhood. And this also reflects, the most important factors that were mentioned in our slide before, which were, you can see the big pink dots. That's where we had lots of strings kind of congregating in one area. You can see it going west off of the Harrisburg Trail into downtown, east towards navigation off the Harrisburg Trail, and then north to south connecting both of the bayous. So key takeaways, people are biking more and want the opportunity to bike for not only the trips that they're taking now to exercise and have fun, but for a variety of trips. And safety and a lack of connectivity is really holding them back. And the first steps that we need to take are to fill the gaps and make connections to nearby destinations, both locally and regionally. And this is another question we have for you guys that you can answer in the chat. Where in the East End would you love to ride your bike? This could be a place that you currently ride your bike, or a place that you would love to ride your bike that you don't feel safe doing so right now. And I'll call out a couple of the ones that we get. So to the market, Polk Street, Harrisburg, Greenway Plaza. So we're seeing both wayside, both local and regional destinations. Noticing the utility corridors as an opportunity. And accessibility from parks to the bayou trails. Yeah, these are all things that are helpful for us to develop a plan that makes sense. Safely connecting 75th to bayou trails. Yeah, you guys have a lot of ideas. That's awesome. Thank you. And if you get more ideas, keep putting them in the chat. We can go back to them later. Go ahead, Clint.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Those are all great ideas. So we want to show you what we've come up with from those ideas. Some of those that you've mentioned are on our maps that you're about to see, and others that we heard from in previous events. And so I wanted to kind of preface what our recommendation maps with what went into those maps. So we have 4 inputs. We identified 4 inputs to our bike network recommendations. So the first was what we called current and planned projects. And what that really means is there's already some entities like Buffalo Bayou Partnership and the City of Houston, Harris County Precinct 1, that are working on other projects in and around the East End. And so we want to make sure that we're tying into those projects and we're considering them as we're building out this network. The second is community feedback. Everything that you just heard from Jessica, we use that as an impetus for building the bike plan network. The third is connecting to those key destinations. So we wanted to make sure that we were hitting all of the great parks in the East End, of which there are many. We wanted to make sure we were hitting schools, those major retail and commercial destinations throughout the East End. And then finally, technical feasibility. So and what I mean by that is that we wanted to make sure we are recommending bikeways on streets where it's actually possible to build a bikeway. And that means taking into consideration the width of the roadway, taking into consideration the number of vehicles that are driving on the roadway, and taking into consideration what kind of bikeway we would need to make sure that the people biking can stay safe, the people driving can stay safe, and the folks who are walking who may be crossing the street in front of bicyclists can stay safe. And so we also had a few guiding principles, and I'll run through those. The first is to make sure that we're accommodating everybody who wants to ride a bike. So we may all know someone who's like Rodrigo on the right there. Rodrigo is extremely comfortable riding on almost any situation. It sounds like Commissioner Garcia putting in 60 miles a week is getting pretty close to Rodrigo. He may be really comfortable on just about any type of bikeway, but that doesn't represent most people who want a bike. In fact, it's a pretty small percentage of the population. There's another group like Kendra in the middle. She's a little bit more confident, but she would prefer if there were a bike lane, and she would really prefer if there were a trail or something that separated her more clearly from traffic. But she can manage. She'll figure it out. And then on the left is most folks who they really would like to bike. They're really interested in it, but they have a lot of safety concerns that are very understandable. So they are the folks who benefit the most from a plan like this. And they're also a really large chunk of people. And based on what we can see from the comments, that may be some of you on this call today. So our goal is to accommodate all users on this bike network. And then the second guiding principle is to actually build a network, not just one bikeway or a couple of bikeways, but build a network that it can actually be used by folks who live in the community to get to their destinations. So on the left, you can see an example of what was done in Seville, Spain. In a very short amount of time, they built a bikeway network and they saw results almost immediately. Biking went up, I think, threefold, and crashes went down by a third. So they saw results in about a decade, which is very quick. And then on the right, you can see in dark red, those are streets that are currently stressful for bicyclists to ride on, often some of our bigger streets. So we want to make sure that we have a network that allows folks to get across those streets or bike on those streets safely. We want to expand access to destinations. We've mentioned this. There are tons of parks, great schools, community resources throughout the East End. And we also want to make sure that everything that we recommend is both feasible and is as high comfort as possible. So that means on the top there, the top right, you can see on a high-speed street or a street with a lot of cars, we want to make sure that there's more separation between the bicyclists and the drivers. And I'm going to pass it over to Jeff to showcase recommendations.
Thanks, Clint, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to talk to you about some of the recommendations that we've been developing with the community to really build out that network that Clint mentioned. I've worked in the East End for over the last 10 years and have seen lots of progress, improvements in things like sidewalks and transit, and think this can really kind of build on that and be a great benefit to many people in the community. And the way we've thought about the bike network and the way we would kind of phase it and think about this as a way to kind of prioritize and think the network of a series of layers. There's kind of 5 buckets. As Clint mentioned, there's the existing bikeway network. Then we'll talk about the planned network. Those are projects that an entity already has in place. And then 3 phases of bikeway implementation that layer over that. And they're all about the same size, plus or minus 15 miles. So that's a way to think about how we would attack and prioritize the creation of a network. The other thing I would say is we've also identified high priority, some of you mentioned destinations outside of the East End proper. And we want to think about those and have identified when those would tie into a recommendation that happens within the East End plan to get to places like downtown, Fifth Ward, University of Houston, et cetera. So I'll kind of walk you through each one of these phases, and then if there's questions, put them in the chat and we'll make sure to answer them either now or as a follow-up to the meeting. So if you want to go to the next slide, Clint, that would be great. So yeah, if we think about the existing bikeway network in the East End, there are some great facilities, but almost all of them are trails, either along Brays Bayou and Gus Wortham Park, some in Buffalo Bayou that are increasingly getting improved, and then some historical work to convert some of the old freight rail lines to comfortable, high quality trails like Harrisburg and Sunset. And that starts to form the bones of a network in some of the places you want to get to, but it really isn't a network. It's a set of disconnected sort of segments. And there has been a lot of work as well, particularly east or west of the East End and north, to create some high comfort bikeways that would be great connections to build from as part of that regional work. So this is our baseline, our starting point. Next slide, Clint. So this next slide I think is really exciting, and it speaks to all of the work that's happening to improve mobility in the East End, and many of them include bikeway components. And what this slide is showing, it would be a good one to look at in the online when you get a chance, is projects that already are happening. So those in yellow are current projects, things that are funded, that are fairly well underway. Things like the new roundabout that's in design at Navigation and Runnels by Guadalupe Plaza Park. The work the Buffalo Bayou is doing and the Parks Board are doing to improve trails along Buffalo Bayou and Brays Bayou respectively, so those become more contiguous. The city of Houston improving and planning to rebuild parts of Lockwood north of Harrisburg and resurface parts of Sherman. And then we have a project shown that Precinct 1 and the city are working on by U of H that would provide a nice connection south. There's also projects that are what I call more in planning, so not as far along, not in design, but have a lot of momentum, and that includes additional trails along the bayou, improvements to navigation, potentially extending the Esplanade, or rethinking parts of navigation as part of the Buffalo Bayou Master Plan, or an exciting project that TxDOT's working on, that they're going to start a planning process on Wayside. I know some of you mentioned Wayside and 69th Macario Garcia, but they're starting a planning process later this year to start to rethink those corridors, and have been open to the idea of changing the cross-section, integrating safe biking. And a project that the city is working on Lawndale to connect that part of Lawndale from Gus Wortham to Brays Bayou. And then there's some sort of, I guess, longer term projects that the Parks Board is working on, Buffalo Bayou Partnership around Buffalo Bayou and connections to the southeast. That would be, huge transformative change. That would be a great step for the area. So lots going on, and again, a great basis for us to work from. Next slide. So this network that's shown here, we call it our phase 1 network. And this is really what we tried to define as the base network that we think makes sense to focus on as a priority to build that first sort of grid of high comfort bikeways that connect to all of the East End neighborhoods. It may not hit every destination, but it's that first 19 miles that would build off the existing and planned projects and make some really key connections. So it includes sort of a set of east-west corridors, so building out navigation from the Esplanade out to Sunset Trail. Thinking about commerce, one thing we hear a lot is extending the Harrisburg Trail. So commerce to the west. And then a corridor like, and can you guys hear me? I had a quick microphone issue. We all good?
You're back. We can hear you.
Sorry about that. And then a corridor like Lawndale and Telephone, building off the connections that have been built on Polk and Leland, getting that connection all the way to the east to Brays Bayou. We also have been looking at good connections south of Mason Park down to the Pecan Park neighborhoods, corridors like Evergreen, Hemlock, Manchester, and then corridors north connecting up to Clinton Drive and towards Lyons Avenue in the Fifth Ward. So really excited about this network, have some good momentum to try and start to think about how we would implement some of these connections. Next slide, please. So the next slide kind of builds on that and fills in some of those gaps, really sort of takes it from what I would say is a roughly half-mile to a mile grid down to a half-mile to, in some cases, a quarter-mile grid. Filling in some key connections, north-south corridors connecting to the bayou, like Sampson, Eastwood, and some additional east-west connections. So Polk and extending the High Comfort Bikeway that's been built there and connecting that over to Gus Wortham. And some more connections to the Lawndale and south towards the Brays Bayou along those streets like Dismuke and Idlewood. And then it also includes some new connections on a corridor like Clinton, which is a pretty wide road with relatively low traffic volumes to create a nice east-west connections on the northern edge of the district that then allows additional connectivity across the freight rail lines and I-10, bringing Fifth Ward down to Buffalo Bayou and all the amenities that are planned along that corridor. Checking if there are any questions. And then the last phase, we call this the full network, sort of the vision network of what we think, and these are shown in the blue colors. They fill in some of the missing gaps. They show the build out of the full Buffalo Bayou plan, connecting all the way from downtown out to the turning basin, the full connection of navigation, more connections on the south side. And then one of the, I think, exciting parts of this plan is the work that's part of what Metro's proposed in their long-range plan Metro Next, that would include connections to an extended green line so the Harrisburg line connecting down towards Hobby Airport, but also a bus rapid transit service that would run north-south through the corridor along the Lockwood corridor, and making sure that we're providing good bike connectivity parallel to and tying into proposed station locations on those projects. So really, this is really the vision. We've sort of assessed all these. We believe they all feasible, some relatively easy, just reallocating existing payments. Some would be a more substantive change, like Commerce, because we have the existing freight rail line that runs in the middle of that street that would need to be addressed. But really think this is an achievable plan with the right amount of focus and resources. So, and then I think with that, I'll turn it, oh yeah, so one of the questions we'd love to hear from you, having heard all that, what are some of the streets that you're most excited to see become more bike friendly, and why?
And while y'all are thinking about that, I'm going to move this back to the maps just in case you need to take a look at the street names.
So hearing, yeah, Lawndale connection to the bayous. That's a great one. Lockwood. Yeah, Commerce, and there have been conversations, I think someone mentioned earlier, about how to get across 59 on Commerce into downtown. So there have been some conversations about how to do that. McKinney, which again would provide a great neighborhood connection, ties into the Columbia Tap. So these are all great. And again, as Clint said, we'll talk about later, these will all be part of that online survey available online to study, and really look forward to getting some more feedback when you've had time to really visit with those.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I'm gonna turn it back over to Jessica.
Great. So now we're going to dive into the programs and policies. And this is kind of everything outside of the concrete or the engineering aspects of the bike plan. And programs and policies are really just ideas and processes that we like so much, we're going to incorporate into the way that we do things. And we like to frame our policy and program ideas within the framework that incorporates equity, diversity, inclusion, engineering, education, evaluation and planning, and encouragement. So making sure that we are covering all our bases when we look at creating bicycle-friendly communities. And you will see these little icons kind of throughout the next few slides to indicate which policy or program supports these buckets of goals, really. Go ahead. Great. So the first two, so these are both programs and kind of buckets of programs, so not like one specific program. But the first is to support bike-friendly businesses. Something that we learned in the survey is that people are really excited and eager to bike to commerce. So how can we facilitate a relationship between government and businesses and the customer to make sure that everyone is getting what they need to be able to bike to businesses within the East End. And this can include certification programs, this can include bike racks and fix-it station agreements, whatever folks need to make that leap into riding their bikes to businesses within the East End. The second piece is hosting signature events, and we were lucky enough to do one, the Bike Bingo or Loteria de Bici. This is an example of an event that could happen regularly to encourage bicycling culture, a cultural of physical activity within the East End. And it's not only, new events that we have the opportunity to do this. We've got Critical Mass, we've got East End Bike Ride, we've got Wellness on Wheels. Knowing what bike culture is happening already in the East End and then supporting them is another way that we can support the bicycling culture in the East End. And then something interesting to point out, you can also tailor these events to fit specific needs. One of the things that we learned through the survey was that we had about twice as many men respond than we did women. So how can we get more women out on bikes? CycloFem is an international movement to encourage women to get on bikes. Is that something that East End is interested in? How can we tailor it to fit? Go ahead. Great, so these are a couple more buckets of programs. And this one, the enhance and maintain what we have. This came up in the survey a lot. As we are building new bikeways and new connections, we want to make sure that we are creating a system that preserves and improves the bikeways that we have already. And that can include, a maintenance program to remove debris and hazards in the roadway. And it can also include improving wayfinding signage along the bikeways that exist today. Another bucket is education, and this is a big piece and a big opportunity for Houston and the East End. And that's to start creating relationships between schools, between, nonprofit organizations, to make sure that everyone on the road has the tools and the knowledge that they need to operate safely on the road. And that can be programmatic and also providing a safe place for where those learning activities can take place. So a walk and wheel skills hub. I remember when I was at Bike Houston, we had a really hard time finding places where we could teach people how to ride bikes safely. So creating the education infrastructure, if you will, to have that be a possibility. So diving into policies, and again, policies are just ideas that we like so much, we're gonna make them rules in one way or the other. And the first policy that we're looking at is one around safety, which came out in the survey when we asked what are the most important things to keep in mind as we develop bikeways, and safety came up. And if you don't know, the Houston Vision Zero Action Plan was just published in September. This is a plan the commissioner was talking about earlier that seeks to eliminate traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries in this plan by 2030. So in this plan are identified streets that carry a disproportionately high number of serious injuries and fatalities. So how can we align the implementation of bikeways with this high injury network to help meet that goal? The second two, I will kind of lump together, but if you ride a bike, you know that the safety and utility of bike lanes is not only determined by the bike lane itself. It's determined by what happens behind the curb too. It's determined by the orientation of our buildings. It's determined by the orientation of our parking. It's determined by driveways, sidewalks, trees. So starting to think more broadly about how can we create a holistic environment to support people on bikes and make it a safer environment for all people. And so that's where the walkable places ordinance and starting to think about tailoring a parallel process to, as we develop bikeways, ensuring that in the future, we are making sure that development supports a better and safer biking environment for folks. You can go ahead. Cool. So I've mentioned kind of a lot of ideas here, but we'd love to hear what program or policy is most exciting to you, or what program or policy, and you should see a poll that popped up because I know I mentioned a lot. Just pick which one. I'm not sure if you can pick more than one.
I believe you can only pick one.
Okay, so hard decisions today. Pick one that resonates the most with you, that would make the biggest improvement in your mind.
I should have had the option to allow panelists to vote, but I only read it right as I was clicking launch polling, but we should have let our panelists vote too. We've got 12 votes in.
Great.
And this is a teaser for the survey. So this question in our survey, you can actually rank. So if you're having trouble figuring out, oh, I wish I could pick education, but signature events is really speaking to me, you can put them number 1 and number 2 in the survey. So this is just practice for y'all. All right, let's get a few more in. Okay, I'm gonna end it. I think hopefully it'll. All right, so are you able to see that, Jessica?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, great. So 27% of respondents said enhancing the network through lighting and wayfinding. So enhancing and protecting what we have. And that's followed by bike education with an educational skills hub. That's great. Awesome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. All right, and so we're going to switch over to the panel now, but before we do that, I just want to reiterate, I know we've been flooding you with this, but we really want your feedback. So we're going to tell you one more time about the survey, but just as a reminder. Without further ado, we've just shared a lot of information with all of you about the network and our ideas for programs and policies. But I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Veronica Chapa-Korchinski, to lead our panel discussion.
Thank you, Clint. And we have, first of all, thank you everyone for being here on, is it Friday yet night? We have, I know it's been a long day for a lot of us here on the panel and for you at home, but this is so important. And I just a lot of information. I bet 50 miles of bikeway. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around how amazing and what the future looks like for us, which is why we're so excited to have this great panel. We have 4 panelists this evening. I think we have one still. Elizabeth, if you're available to turn on your camera, we'd love to see you. But yay, there you are. I was gonna ask if we could have introductions because each of you is amazing and changes the world in very different ways. So I was gonna ask if we could start with Stephen, Lauren, Elizabeth, and then Jose.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephen Deutsch. I'm a wraparound resource specialist here at Navarro Middle School. And I'm excited to be part of this project and this conversation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Grove, and I am the City of Houston employee in Houston Public Works. And I focus a lot on ped and bike safety and implementation of Vision Zero, which we've talked about. And I'm really grateful to be here and hear from you about your bikeway needs and concerns and how we can make this thing happen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Van Horn. I'm an urban planner and public health analyst for Harris County Public Health, and I work in their built environment unit, which basically just focuses on improving health and equity through the built environment. So everything that you, all the streets and sidewalks you use to get places, and then where you live, work, learn, worship, and play. And I'm really excited to be on this panel and learn from the other panelists and all of you as well.
Hi, I'm Jose Solis. I'm the project manager for construction and planning at Buffalo Bayou Partnership. I was in charge of the Buffalo Bayou East Master Plan, so kind of looking at this exact same area. Our plan included a lot of transit and bike connections as well, so I'm really excited to see, to work with everybody on the panel and everybody working on this bike plan to make it happen.
Well, and congratulations to Jose. You just moved to another house in the East End.
Yes, I'm now officially a homeowner in the East End too. I've lived here for a while, but now I'm a homeowner. So
congratulations. Yes. So it's the last day of Women's History Month, and it's the last hours of programming. So I'm going to lead with a question for our women leaders, because we get to do that in Women's History Month, as we should every day in the search for equity, right? So we've talked a lot about the plan in terms of safety, mobility, and health. And so Lauren and Elizabeth, you both have very valuable insight into like specific pieces of this on the plan. We're going to lead with Lauren and then go to Elizabeth. How do you feel the East End plan specifically, especially Lauren, when you're looking at Vision Zero, how does this lead into the safety piece, and what do you want to see?
Yeah, so just to reiterate, there is a Vision Zero action plan that the goal is to end traffic deaths and serious injuries. And that's for all of Houston, 670 square miles. The 30,000 foot view of how to do that. And so we really need plans like the East End Bike Plan to get at neighborhood level specific recommendations and solutions to making our streets safer. And so that builds towards ending traffic deaths and serious injuries and helps us achieve Vision Zero for the whole city. So it's really plans like these and input from the community that lend itself towards being more specific at the neighborhood level that really support Vision Zero. So I think that's a huge part of it. And when we make our streets safer through implementation of bikeways, we make it safer for everybody, and we reduce crashes across all road users. There's a lot of really great research out there showing that streets with bikeways are inherently safer and crashes are reduced across all road users. And so it's really, I think, remarkable that we can use bikeways, designing our streets to make them safer for everybody.
So in addition to the safety, Elizabeth, focusing on health, and we can't talk about the East End without talking about tacos. How, and when we had the commissioner challenging us with 60 miles a week, talk to us about the intersectionality here and how maybe we should be thinking about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So my team within the Built Environment Unit actually worked on something called a health impact review, an HIR. So it's a report basically that looks at the health implications of a plan or a policy or a project that's in the draft phase. And so through this process of developing this report, which will be posted on our website and hopefully the East End Bike Plan website as soon as it's ready to go, we've been able to look at this intersection and some of the biggest health benefits that are going to come out of adding bike infrastructure are really related to physical activity. So the more physically active you are, the less likely you are to develop chronic diseases and cancers. And so by getting out there on your bike and using this new bike infrastructure, you're meeting those physical activity goals that are going to improve your health. They're also going to improve your mental well-being and your mental health, just being out in nature and getting fresh air, getting the endorphins from cycling. And there's also air quality benefits to switching, especially actually making that transition from taking your vehicle on shorter trips to taking your bicycle on shorter trips. We're going to lower greenhouse gas emissions, and that can have a whole host of implications for like asthma rates and other lung diseases and conditions. And then I think it's just important to emphasize, obviously, the safety aspect of it that Lauren has already touched on, that just by building this infrastructure and making the bike lanes, separated, you're really increasing comfort levels, you're making people safer from cars, and then you get more people on the roads, and there's really safety in numbers. That's what the research shows when it comes to cycling.
So as we're thinking about what one or two things we can do for bikeways, Elizabeth, I'm going to ask you, do you have an additional recommendation that maybe you've not seen that you want us to think about for the bikeway piece? Let me just ask you.
Yeah, do you just mean like in terms of physical infrastructure, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, either physical infrastructure or even things that we should consider as a community. I think, for example, you highlighted separated bike lanes. Are there other pieces that you want us to think about from a health perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically the research shows that the more separated you are from vehicles, the safer you're going to be typically. And I hesitate to get too deep into like any engineering recommendations or anything. I'll leave that to the engineers. But if you have the separated bike lanes, taking advantage of those rail lines that are not being used anymore. And you also get kind of more of the nature and neighborhood views than being on a heavily trafficked street. There are safety implications for all types of separation. That could be, those bollards or, different just like widths of separation that's painted on the road itself. And then one of the other major things, and this is a major component of the Vision Zero as well, is just lowering speed limits, because if you have lower speed limits, that means even if there are, incidents that take place that result in injury, they're going to be a lot less severe.
So thank you for that. One of the interesting challenges that we have, Stephen, and you know this best, is we have a really young population in the East End. Not a lot of them seem to be biking. And for those of you who don't know Stephen, you should. As the wraparound specialist for Navarro, you touch hundreds of lives every year, and you're a go-to partner with everything that you do with specifically the middle school population. So, asking you, what could we do and what do we need to think about specifically with the students that you work with in terms of the bike plan, making the East End more bike family, like bike friendly? What do you think are the next steps we should be thinking about to serve students?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Veronica. I think, serving the youth will help in many ways by making the bike lanes a lot safer. It will encourage students from elementary all the way to high school be able to use the bike lanes. But I think it starts with educating our students. And I think Jessica talked about it earlier, developing more bike-friendly initiatives, education, just being able to really help our students understand how to properly use their bicycles and properly be able to use the bike lanes that are in the neighborhoods. That will encourage our students to use their bicycles, the bike lanes to get to and from school. And then, we all understand that transportation is difficult in many of our families. And this is an opportunity for the students to be able to have access to cheaper transportation and be able to attend school more frequently and not have to worry about how are they going to get to school if they don't have either a vehicle or if they don't live within that 2-mile radius that allows students to use bus transportation.
That's a lot of good points for us to think about. So then our next partner in all of this, Jose, you've got the East Sector plan, so hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 20 years that you're responsible for leading. You've got the 30 or 50,000 foot view of this. So my question to you is, what are 1 or 2 things that maybe we haven't mentioned that you really want to emphasize that we think about, and what's next for the bike plan or with Buffalo Bayou Partnership and how you want to develop bike paths?
One thing that I'll mention, and this is one of our key goals that we look at and we incorporate into our projects, is also is safety, but from a different perspective, is that some people, when they see an empty trail, they don't actually feel safe, not about not that their car is going to hit them, but actually that they might be fearful that they're scared that they may get jumped or whatever. And so one thing that we're definitely including in our plans, especially up and down the bayou where you can be in positions where you're not close to a neighborhood. I mean, a lot of like for instance, the Harrisburg Trail, you're right next to somebody's house and there's people around, but on the bayou trails, you can be kind of far away. So what we're really including is lighting on our trails so that all along the bayou, people feel safe and comfortable. And I think it's kind of one of those sort of positive feedback loops that the more people you have on the trails and the more continuous the trails are and the more extensive the network is, the more people will feel comfortable to use them. And it's not like, well, I don't want to be the only one on that trail. So I think, for, specific things like the lighting on the bayou trails, that's one. But in terms of the continuous network, if it gives more people the option and creates that critical mass of people to get on the trail, it'll just continue to build on each other and more people will use it. So that's a kind of a different angle to look at the safety issue.
So to the group, to Stephen, Lauren, Elizabeth, do y'all agree with this? Is the benefit that we're getting more people? I see smiles. Y'all are excited about the possibilities. Take the mic, sir.
Yeah, I definitely agree that there's a lot of great opportunities for the neighborhood, for the East End, by creating this bike network. So I definitely agree. I'm excited. Working at Navarro Middle School, I definitely see how it's going to benefit our students. It's going to benefit our families. in many, many ways. So I'm definitely excited.
Yeah, I'm glad, Jose, that you touched on the lighting aspects, because I think that's a really important part of safety, especially for those trails that feel a bit more isolated. And I think it's true, along the streets and everything as well, that you want to have more lighting and more sort of infrastructure that's not actually a trail or a bike lane itself, but other infrastructure that supports cycling. So that could be, bicycle specific signals at intersections, or being able to have like a bicycle button like a pedestrian would, to push and be able to get the signal to go faster for them. And having better, bicycle or pedestrian level lighting that makes you feel safer. All of those kinds of infrastructure changes can really help get more people biking and also make it safer.
Yeah, and I'll just, I noticed in the chat when there were questions and prompts specifically about, which streets are you most excited about? And as I was watching the response, I was also checking some of our crash data, more dangerous streets, and there's alignment there. So people want to be able to address safety concerns, and that is being felt just if they're walking or biking, but we're also seeing that in crash data. So here's a really amazing opportunity through this work and working with the community to bring them really safe streets where we're also providing connections to really key destinations. And so I think that's really exciting too. And I really value that community feedback and in that way, as we can look at the crash data, it doesn't always tell us the full story. So that's why it's so important to hear from the community as well.
So one of the interesting questions we have in the Q&A, and Lauren, we may have talked about this a little bit, but this is really to the group. Are there existing programs either in Houston or that we've seen in other cities in the country that encourage students and parents to bike to school? It seems like we keep talking about that educational component, but is there an example that y'all have come across, either in talking to colleagues or in some of maybe your readings or panels that you've sat on?
I mean, I actually may defer to my fellow panelists here, but what immediately comes to mind is a sort of national safe routes to school program that addresses that very thing, like advocating and implementing more routes to school for walking and biking, because I think what we hear is they want parents and students want those options and they're not there. So they're being forced to drive when they would want to make a trip walking or biking. So safe routes to school is really sort of trying to get at that, but I'm curious to hear what others have to say.
Yeah, the Built Environment Group actually does a lot of work with safe routes to school and safe routes to parks. So we've been working with the city of Baytown and with Pasadena, and we're working now in the city of Houston as well to try to bring these plans about. And we've been doing different kind of public engagement events. A lot of the time just doing like a bike to school day or a walk to school day. There's walking trains and biking trains where you kind of, get all in a group and line up together and go together safely. And our group also uses this infrastructure assessment tool when we're looking at the kind of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure around schools and parks, to evaluate that infrastructure, the sidewalks and everything, and see where improvements should be prioritized. And then we work with the schools as well to, do some bike skills clinics and things like that. And so we're huge advocates of the Safe Routes to School program.
And I was gonna give a quick shout out to Renee Gonzalez. I haven't met him in person, but I have heard from several people in the East End of his Wellness on Wheels program. And I think on the chat, he put it's a program at Milby High School that encourages the students to ride to school and have weekly mental health rides. So I'll be happy to meet Renee in the future when we have a program there at Navarro Middle School.
That's awesome. Look at us making connections. This is what it's about in the virtual space. All right, we have a question to the panelists, and I'm gonna kick the can to one of y'all because I don't think I know the answer to this. But Jesse wants to know if there's any talk of incorporating bike-friendly elements into the Houston incentives for green development. He says, you know, faster permit times or other incentives. I don't know, Lauren, have you heard anything? Jose?
No, I have not heard about this particular incentive program.
I haven't heard anything either. I mean, I like the idea. I mean, my understanding is most of the Houston incentives for green development, and Lauren, please correct me if I'm wrong, has really been more related to flooding infrastructure than you know, transportation infrastructure. But I mean, I bet you anything that Marissa Aho, you know, the Chief Resilient Officer, and Laura Cunningham, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer, both of them would be, they would, you know, appreciate a program like that or champion a program like that.
Well, and I have to mention, I've had 2 developers contact the district office in the last month, and one of them was asking about making the property that they want to develop, they want to integrate the walkability with the neighborhood. And another one is a developer who's worked in Boulder and other markets, and they want to integrate their bike plan on the property with what we're doing. So this is kind of this is a really valuable anchor for all of us. So then the last question, we've talked about a lot of data, and I want to be sensitive that we're getting right to that 8 o'clock hour, but there's a lot of excitement about what we're doing. And you know, the question is, what do we need to do to be successful? Implementing it, maintaining it, doing this. So why don't we start with Jose and then to Stephen. What do you think are the elements that you really think we need to focus on to have success in the implementation and the maintenance of this bike plan?
I mean, for us, it is really, I mean, I think we look at this as a key component of our overall master plan is, you know, there's a couple things. One, building trust with the community itself, you know, really making sure, and that's what, you know, this process is about, is making sure that we're actually listening to the community and hearing them. And you know, for example, like we had a community meeting a couple of weeks ago where we had made an assumption about something in the master plan, and then we presented it to a particular neighborhood group, and they didn't actually want, or they didn't want exactly what we wanted. And, you know, so it's not just listening once, it's listening continuously. And like, as we start drilling down into the details, still listening, you know, so that's one of, you know, the key pieces. And then I'd say the other one is to really like identify key successes that we can, you know, implement early. And that's what, you know, those early phases that Clint and Jeff really talked about, like, and we're working on that too. We have very key gaps in the Buffalo Bayou Trail Network. And our primary goal right now is really to close those gaps so that we have continuous trails, so that we can inspire confidence in the community to say, okay, there is something happening. This isn't just something on paper that, you know, we're, you know, we don't need another plan. We need action. So those are the 2 things I would say, you know, we need, or measures of success.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to what I mentioned earlier. I think it starts with educating our youth at an early age, being able to educate our elementary students. So that way they can continue using those bike paths all the way from elementary to middle school to high school. And by the time they're young adults, hopefully those bike lanes will connect to like our universities and then to to their, hopefully they can stay within the community and work within the community. So I think if we start early by providing proper education, proper programming, I even like the incentives for students. If we can implement those things at an early age, I think you will also build sustainability within the bike network.
So Lauren and Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly, it's really important that the recommendations that come from this plan are integrated, ingrained into the city's existing plans and programs and any future plan or program for street reconstruction. So things like our capital improvement programming, making sure that those that have been identified are ingrained in any future funding. Also working with a bicycle advisory committee that the city has. They're currently working on prioritizing streets in the Houston Bike Plan, and so using Eastend Bike Plan recommendations to bring those streets up in the prioritization process will help with implementation. And so I think it's really just making sure that the recommendations, specific recommendations for streets and bikeways that are identified in this plan are ingrained in the city's programming moving forward.
Noted. And that's a brilliant way to collaborate together.
Yeah, I would echo everything that the other panelists have said. I think that education, engagement, and ensuring that there's access to bicycles is really important. And then I would say, obviously, connecting with partners. I mean, there's all these great people that are working on this plan, and then advocates within the East End, different groups that are working on this. So really bringing together the expertise of all those different groups and the different resources and skill sets that they have to help find the funding and actually implement these projects on the ground.
So Elizabeth, as you were talking, we got a question for the group, and it's a good one, y'all. And this is the hot seat question. This is the question from Plan to Action. But from the Q&A, we've been asked, how can East End residents ensure these projects are funded and implemented? And I'm gonna say the easy answer on this one is that we need citizen involvement and residents to speak out, because the panelists and I are our advocates, but it is much more meaningful when it comes from you. But Lauren, how do you feel as representing the city, and then Elizabeth representing the county on this?
Nodding my head because I'm getting messages that my audio is a little choppy, so I apologize, but I couldn't have said it better. Yes, partnerships are key.
And the other thing that helps is having partners and friends like Jose Solis. And I'm going to say, the joke is we need friends with money. That helps. And Jose, I'm not saying Jose has all the money, but Jose is a lead organization that's fundraising for this. I mean, the district goes out for some federal grants, but I want to emphasize what a valuable partner Buffalo Bayou Partnership is. And you do these community meetings late at night, and you also need resident input and connections to people with donations to invest in this.
Yes, absolutely, we do. And it is one of those that, we will, I mean, we do continue, we actually just hired a community engagement manager so that we can specifically, reach deeper into the communities, because as much as we, we do have the ability to fundraise, we really do look at or there's 4 principles we included in our master plan. It's authentic, connected, inclusive, and resilient. Obviously connected, we're really addressing right now, but the authentic and the inclusive pieces, authentic, we want to make sure that everything we do is, really fits in with you know, the area. And so that we absolutely need input from people and have people engaged. And then the same for the inclusive piece. We want to make sure that people feel like this belongs to them. So once again, we really want to make sure that we're hearing from the community. So more than anything else, echoing what everybody else said is, you know, is to stay engaged. And, you know, when we have a community engagement event, you know, reach out, you know, be involved with us. When there's a, you know, either a city or county, when they reach out to you, get involved with them. But the more we hear from you, the better all the things that we're working on become.
Well, and he opened up the meeting today, but I think everyone would agree that Commissioner Garcia is not only a leader, but a partner and a friend, and listens, and has been great about implementation. And we are, for Precinct 2, we're the launch of hopefully multiple plans where we put it out there, but we all come together to fund it. So the, you know, the hard piece of these proposals from a community aspect is not one partner can make it all happen. It literally takes, we think, what do we have, 23 participants on the call, and about 10 of us as panelists having meetings like this. And so a couple of important pieces I want to mention before I hand it back to Clint and TEI to close this out is the East End Bike Plan is going to live on a website. We're going to have this information out there with Precinct 2. And now we have partners with the city that are reminding us, from the education space, from Buffalo Bayou Partnership in the county. We're going to refer to those plans moving forward. We need to continue to have your input as a participant on that survey. Please, without your time, we don't have the vocal support that things that we know need to happen. And an example I can give you is, we all know it's hard to ride your bike on Commerce Street with those rail lines exposed. And everyone here is nodding their head because if they've ridden their bike, but they've probably fallen once and skinned their knees just on that route. So we know that the survey link was out. We'll put it again and ask you to please complete it. The other piece is we need to share it. We have folks that didn't join us this evening because this meeting actually conflicted with some bike rides, and we want to respect that, which is why this webinar is going to be available after the fact. So please share it with the students. Please share it with those active cycling groups that want to remain active in the East End, so we can get their feedback and make sure that if we're planning 50 miles, we're doing it right. Because we really do have one good shot at this. So we want to make it as inclusive as possible for the group. So Clint, we've been talking for a bit. We you know, we can't applaud for the panel, but how about we made it? Y'all are wonderful people. Y'all are talented and brilliant, and we want to thank you not just for this, but for everything you do to change the world and our community. So Clint, we're going to hand it to you to take us to the next step and close us out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Veronica, and all of the panelists. Those were really wonderful responses and spot on. I think y'all bring expertise to know how to make this work, and we're really happy that all of you have been part of this and helping guide this. All I want to say was just what Veronica just said, and I'm sharing the link one more time in the chat. Please fill out the survey when you finish, when you get off the call today. And also, as Veronica said, what you can do as a resident or as someone who visits the East End or maybe works in the East End is share that survey with your friends and folks that you know frequent the East End. I know, Jeff, did you want to answer? We have one question from the Q&A that I think was relevant that I think you mentioned wanting to answer.
Well, I answered one in the chat, but it was
Okay.
Perhaps an implementation question of like, what is the timeline for getting some of this stuff on the ground? I mentioned in the Q&A, you know, our goal is really to start with that phase 1 network, build off a lot of the work that's already underway, and really try to get as much of that phase 1 network funded and implemented over the next 3 to 5 years, and then things start to build upon those. So there will be an implementation chapter in the plan. We try to lay some of those out and some strategies to do that. It includes another thing someone mentioned was integration with things like bike share. So we've been coordinating with bike share on the plan to make sure that as that network grows, it grows together, that we have a place to ride and a bike to ride. So thinking about how those all come together, and that's part of that final step in the plan, building off the feedback. So take the survey and we can finish it up from there.
Great, thank you so much. And I'll just close out by saying we will be back for our final community meeting sometime in May. So keep an eye out on the website, and we'll try to get it posted on social media so that everybody knows how to join us for that final event. It'll actually be kind of a kickoff to the implementation. So the end of the plan and the start of the actual implementation. So that'll be exciting. Thank you to everybody. We really appreciate you taking the time today, and look forward to seeing your survey responses.